The sound of expensive china shattering against marble walls echoed through the Johnson mansion like gunshots. Grace Johnson, 16 years old and worth more money than most people see in their lifetime, stood in the center of her father's million-dollar dining room, tears streaming down her face as she swept another plate of gourmet food onto the floor. "I won't eat it," she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. "I can't eat anything. Leave me alone." The professional chef, who had flown in from France just that morning, backed away slowly, his white uniform stained with what used to be a perfectly prepared seafood risotto. His hands trembled as he untied his apron. "Sir," he said to Samuel Johnson, who stood frozen in the doorway, "I cannot work under these conditions. This is the 5th plate she has thrown. I am sorry, but I must leave immediately." Samuel, a man who commanded oil rigs and mining operations across 3 countries, looked completely helpless as he watched his daughter collapse into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The chef gathered his things and hurried out, just like the 4 others before him that week. "Grace, sweetheart," Samuel whispered, approaching her like she was made of fragile glass. "Please, just try to eat something. Anything. You haven't had a proper meal in days." Grace looked up at her father with hollow eyes. "Daddy, I try, but every time I take a bite, I see." She stopped herself, shaking her head violently. "I just can't. Please don't make me." Samuel pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed a number. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Dr. Michael, it's Samuel Johnson again. She's getting worse. I don't know what else to do. I'll pay 500,000 naira to anyone who can get my daughter to eat. Anyone." From the kitchen doorway, hidden behind the marble pillar, someone was watching this entire scene unfold. Patience Okoye clutched her last transport fare in one hand and a crumpled newspaper job listing in the other. At 52 years old, with calloused hands and worn clothes that had seen better days, she looked nothing like the type of person who belonged in this mansion. But sometimes, the most unexpected solutions come from the most unlikely places. Welcome back to African Tales by Amani, where every story teaches us about love, hope, and the power of the human spirit. If you're just joining us for the first time, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with your friends and family. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's dive deeper into today's incredible story that will leave you speechless. 3 hours earlier. The chaos at the Johnson mansion had been building for months, but that Monday morning felt different. It felt like the day everything would finally break apart completely. Samuel had been up since 4 a.m., pacing the floors of his study like a man possessed. Coffee cups scattered across his desk, untouched business reports piling up, phone calls from international clients going unanswered. For the first time in his career, Samuel Johnson, the man who had built an empire from nothing, was failing at the most important job of his life, being a father. "Sir," Mary, the head housekeeper, knocked softly on his door. "The new chef from France has arrived. Shall I show him to Miss Grace's room?" Samuel looked up with bloodshot eyes. "Mary, do you think this one will be different?" Mary hesitated. In her 15 years of working for the Johnson family, she had never seen her boss so broken. "Sir, we can only hope and pray." "Hope and pray," Samuel repeated bitterly. "I've been doing that for 2 years, Mary. Ever since Elizabeth died, it's like Grace died with her. She's disappearing before my eyes, and I don't know how to stop it." Mary's heart ached for both father and daughter. She had watched Grace transform from a vibrant, laughing child into a hollow shadow who barely spoke and refused to eat. The doctors had tried everything: therapy, medication, specialized treatments. Nothing worked. "Sir, maybe what Miss Grace needs isn't a professional chef. Maybe she needs—" "What, Mary? What else can I possibly try? I've had the best child psychologists in Nigeria. I've flown in nutritionists from America. I've hired chefs who cook for royalty. What's left?" Mary didn't have an answer, so she simply said, "I'll bring the chef upstairs, sir." Meanwhile, 3 buses away from the mansion, Patience Okoye sat at the hospital bedside of her 7-year-old grandchild, David. The little boy's breathing was labored, and the machines around his bed beeped constantly, monitoring his weak vital signs. "Grandma," David whispered, his voice barely audible, When can I go home? Patience's heart shattered all over again. She had been asking herself the same question every day for the past month. David needed surgery that cost more money than she could earn in 5 years of working as a housemaid. Soon, my love. Very soon, she lied, stroking his fevered forehead. The doctor appeared at the foot of the bed, his expression grave. Mrs. Okoye, we need to discuss David's treatment plan. Outside in the hallway, the doctor was brutally honest. The infection is spreading faster than we anticipated. Without the surgery within the next week, I'm afraid. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Patience understood perfectly. Doctor, please, just give me a few more days. I'll find the money somehow. Mrs. Okoye, I've already extended the payment deadline twice. The hospital administration is pressuring me. I wish I could do more, but... Patience nodded numbly and walked back to David's room. She sat beside his bed and closed her eyes, whispering the same prayer she had been repeating for weeks. God, if you can make a way where there is no way, please show me now. This child is innocent. Take me instead, but please save him. That's when her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Naomi, who worked as a cleaner in Victoria Island. Patience, I heard something today that might interest you. The big oil man Samuel Johnson is looking for someone to help his daughter. They say he's desperate and willing to pay anything. I don't have details, but thought you should know. Patience stared at the text message for a long time. Samuel Johnson. She knew that name. More than knew it. She had history with that family, history that she had tried to forget for 2 years. She looked at David, so small and fragile in the hospital bed, then at the text message that might be her only hope. Sometimes the past comes back to offer us a chance at redemption. She stood up, kissed David's forehead, and whispered, Grandma is going to fix this, baby. I promise. Back at the Johnson mansion. The French chef lasted exactly 43 minutes. Grace had thrown 3 plates of food, refused to even look at the elaborate meal he had prepared, and finally screamed so loudly that the neighbor's security called to check if someone was being murdered. Samuel found himself back in his study, head in his hands, when his business partner Peter walked in without knocking. Samuel, this can't continue. You haven't been to the office in a week. You missed the quarterly board meeting. The shareholders are asking questions. Let them ask, Samuel said without looking up. My daughter is dying, Peter. Everything else can wait. She's not dying, Samuel. She's troubled, yes, but... Look at her. Samuel exploded, jumping to his feet. She's lost 15 pounds in 2 months. She barely speaks. She stays in her room all day staring at pictures of her mother. If that's not dying, then what is it? Peter was quiet for a moment. Maybe it's time to consider residential treatment. There are facilities that specialize in... No, I will not send my daughter away. I failed Elizabeth when she was dying. I was too busy with work to see how sick she was getting. I won't fail Grace too. Samuel, you didn't fail Elizabeth. The cancer. I wasn't there enough, Peter. Elizabeth used to beg me to spend more time at home, to be present with Grace, to put family first. I always said, after this deal, or after this project. There was always something more important than being home. Samuel's voice broke. Elizabeth died knowing that her daughter would grow up with a father who was too busy to truly see her. And now look, Grace is disappearing, and I don't even know how to reach her. Peter sat down heavily in the chair across from Samuel's desk. So what's your plan? Keep hiring random people to cook for her until one of them magically fixes everything. If that's what it takes, yes. Samuel, be realistic. It's been 20 different chefs and caregivers. What makes you think number 21 will be different? Samuel looked out the window at the garden where Grace used to play with her mother. Because Peter, I have to believe that somewhere out there is someone who can reach my daughter. Someone who can remind her that life is worth living. At that exact moment, the intercom on Samuel's desk crackled to life. Sir, Mary's voice came through. There's a woman at the gate. She says she heard about Miss Grace and would like to help. Samuel and Peter looked at each other. Another chef? Peter asked skeptically. I don't think so, sir, Mary replied. She looks like she's seen some hard times. But there's something about her, sir. Something different. Samuel pressed the intercom button. Bring her up, Mary. Samuel, Peter warned. You need to be careful. Desperate people sometimes attract predators who see an opportunity. What choice do I have, Peter? What choice do I have? 5 minutes later, Patience Okoye stood in the grand foyer of the Johnson mansion for the second time in her life. The first time had been 12 years ago, when she was young and hopeful, hired as Elizabeth Johnson's personal assistant and cook during her pregnancy with Grace. Now she stood there again, older, weathered by hardship, but driven by the same love that had brought her there the first time. Love for the Johnson family, even if they had forgotten her. Samuel walked down the curved staircase, and Patience held her breath. Would he recognize her? After 2 years, after all the grief and chaos, would he remember the woman who had been practically family to them during the happiest time of their lives? Samuel looked at her carefully, and she could see him struggling with a sense of familiarity, but the recognition didn't come. She looked too different now. Older, thinner, marked by struggle in ways that the comfortable, well-fed assistant he had once known had not been. You're the woman who thinks she can help my daughter, he asked, his voice carrying the same mixture of desperation and skepticism she had heard him use with countless others. Yes, sir, Patience replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My name is Patience Okoye. The name meant nothing to him. He had called her Patience back then, but her last name had been different. She had been married to a different man, living a different life. Now she was a widow, a different person shaped by different circumstances. Do you have any professional training in nutrition or child psychology? No, sir. Any certificates in culinary arts? No, sir. Samuel stopped in front of her, studying her carefully. Something about her was familiar, but he couldn't place what it was. Then what exactly makes you think you can succeed where trained professionals have failed? Patience looked directly into his eyes, those same tired, worried eyes she had seen 2 years ago at Elizabeth's funeral, before grief had made him disappear into himself. Sir, sometimes the answer isn't in what we know from books. Sometimes it's in what we understand from the heart. Your daughter is not just refusing food. She's refusing to accept comfort. And comfort, real comfort, doesn't come from expensive ingredients. It comes from hands that cook with love, from someone who understands that feeding a person is about more than nutrition. It's about nourishing their soul. Something in her voice made Samuel pause. There was wisdom there, and a quiet confidence that reminded him of someone, though he couldn't remember who. The salary is 50,000 naira per month, he said finally. Sir, I'm not looking for permanent employment. Just give me 1 week. If I can't help your daughter, you pay me nothing. If I can. She hesitated, thinking of David in the hospital. Then we can discuss terms. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Every instinct told him that this woman was different from the others, though he couldn't explain why. Finally, he nodded. 1 week. But I'm warning you, Grace has been through enough disappointment. If you fail, don't expect me to be understanding. I won't fail, sir. As Patience spoke those words, she was making a promise not just to Samuel, but to Elizabeth's memory, to Grace's future, and to her own desperate need to save David. She had no way of knowing that she was about to embark on a journey that would heal not just Grace, but the entire Johnson family, including wounds they didn't even know they had. Day 1. The first encounter. Grace sat in her room, curled up on her window seat overlooking the garden, when Mary knocked on her door. This had become their routine. Mary would announce the new chef. Grace would refuse to see them. The chef would insist on trying anyway. Grace would have a breakdown, and the chef would leave. Miss Grace, your father has hired someone new to cook for you. Grace didn't even turn around. Send them away. I'm not hungry. She's not exactly a chef, miss. She's more like a maid. A maid. Grace finally looked up, confused. This was different from the usual pattern. Daddy hired a maid to cook for me? Mary opened the door wider, and Patience stepped in carrying a small tray. Grace immediately noticed that this woman looked nothing like the fancy chefs who had been parading through their house. She was older, dressed simply, and her hands looked like they had actually worked for a living. More than that, there was something in her eyes. Not the calculating look of someone trying to complete a task for money, but the warm, concerned look of someone who actually cared. "Hello, Grace," Patience said softly, sitting down in a chair across from her. "My name is Patience." Grace studied her carefully. "Are you here to force me to eat too?" "No, child. I'm here to sit with you." Grace blinked in surprise. Every other adult who had entered her room in the past months had come with one mission: get her to eat. They had brought elaborate meals, given speeches about nutrition, tried to bribe her, threatened her, reasoned with her. This was completely different. "I brought you something," Patience said, uncovering the tray. "But I'm not going to ask you to eat it. I just want to tell you about it." On the tray was a simple bowl of pepper soup with small pieces of fish, and a side of soft, golden plantain. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but the aroma that filled the room was unlike anything Grace had smelled in months. It didn't smell like restaurant food or chef food. It smelled like home, like love. "This is the soup my grandmother used to make for me when I was sad," Patience said, settling back in her chair. She would say, "Patience, food is not just about filling your stomach. Food is about filling your heart." Grace found herself leaning forward slightly, despite herself. "What do you mean?" She meant that when you cook for someone, you put your care into every ingredient. "The fish in this soup came from the market this morning, and I chose each piece carefully, thinking about making a meal that would comfort you. The plantain was peeled with hands that were hoping to see you smile. The pepper was measured with love." For the first time in months, Grace felt her stomach respond to food with something other than nausea. She didn't eat it, she couldn't, but she didn't feel the usual revulsion either. Instead, she felt curious. Can you tell me more about your grandmother?" Patience smiled, and Grace noticed that it was a real smile, not the forced professional smile she had grown used to from doctors and therapists. "She was a wise woman. She used to say, when the heart is broken, the stomach follows. But when the heart begins to heal, the stomach remembers how to be hungry again." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, with Grace occasionally glancing at the bowl of soup. The room felt different with Patience in it. Calmer, warmer, less empty. "Mrs. Patience?" "Yes, child. Why don't you seem afraid of me?" The question caught Patience off guard. "Afraid of you? Why would I be afraid of you? Everyone else is. They're afraid I'll scream at them, or throw things, or have one of my episodes. They look at me like I'm some kind of wild animal they have to be careful around." Patience's heart broke a little. "Grace, you're not a wild animal. You're a young girl who is in pain. There's nothing frightening about that. It just makes me want to help you feel better." "But what if I do scream at you? What if I throw your soup on the floor like I did to all the others?" Patience shrugged gently. "Then I'll clean it up and make you another bowl tomorrow. Soup is easy to replace. Trust is harder to rebuild, but even that can be done with patience." She smiled at her own name. "Patience is my specialty." Stared at her for a long moment, then did something that surprised both of them. She laughed. It was a small laugh, rusty from lack of use, but it was genuine. "Did you choose your name because you're so patient, or did you become patient because of your name?" "My grandmother used to say that names choose us, not the other way around. Maybe I was meant to be patient so I could be here with you right now." When Patience finally stood to leave, Grace called out softly, "Mrs. Patience?" "Yes, child. Thank you for not trying to force me. And thank you for not being afraid." After Patience left, Grace sat staring at the soup for another hour. She could feel the warmth emanating from the bowl, could smell the comforting spices, could almost taste the love that had gone into its preparation. Then, almost without realizing it, she picked up the spoon and took the smallest sip. It tasted like love. It tasted like safety. It tasted like someone who genuinely cared whether she lived or died. For the first time in 2 years, Grace finished an entire bowl of food. Day 2, Small Miracles. Samuel was in his study, trying unsuccessfully to focus on quarterly reports, when Mary burst in with an expression he hadn't seen on her face in months: hope. "Sir, you need to see this." "See what, Mary?" "Please tell me Grace didn't have another episode with the new woman." "No, sir, quite the opposite. Miss Grace ate the entire bowl of soup last night." "The entire bowl, sir. And this morning, she asked if Patience could make her breakfast." Samuel dropped his pen. "She asked for food?" "Not just food, sir. She asked for Patience specifically. She's been asking questions about her all morning." Samuel stood up so quickly that his chair rolled backward into the window. He hadn't dared to hope, hadn't allowed himself to believe that this time might be different, but the evidence was undeniable. "Where are they now?" "In the kitchen, sir. Patience is teaching Miss Grace about African spices." Samuel practically ran to the kitchen, then stopped just outside the doorway when he heard something that made his heart skip a beat. Grace was laughing. Actually laughing, for the first time since Elizabeth's funeral. He peered around the corner and saw Grace sitting on a stool at the kitchen island, watching intently as Patience explained the difference between various peppers and spices. Grace was engaged, asking questions, even smiling. "So this one is Scotch bonnet?" Grace asked, holding up a small, fiery pepper. "Yes, but be careful not to touch your eyes afterward. This pepper is very powerful. A little bit goes a long way." "Like medicine?" "In small doses, it heals. In large doses, it can overwhelm. The same is true with many things in life. Love, sadness, hope. The key is finding the right balance." Grace nodded seriously, as if this was the most important lesson she had ever learned. "Patience, how did you become so wise? Life is the best teacher, child. When you go through difficult times, you learn lessons that books can't teach you." "What difficult times did you go through?" Patience paused, her hands stilling over the spices. Samuel leaned closer, curious about this woman who had managed to reach his daughter when no one else could. "I lost someone very important to me," Patience said finally. "Someone who taught me about love and kindness and the importance of taking care of others." "Was it your grandmother?" "No, child. It was someone a bit younger than me. Someone who became like a younger sister to me." Grace was quiet for a moment. "Was she sick like my mother was?" "Yes, she was very sick. And when she died, I thought my world would end too." "But it didn't?" "No, it didn't. Because she taught me that love doesn't die when a person dies. Love lives on in the actions we take, the kindness we show, the care we give to others. Every time I cook for someone with love, every time I comfort someone who is sad, I keep her memory alive." Samuel felt tears spring to his eyes. This woman, whoever she was, understood loss in a way that the professional counselors had not. She wasn't trying to fix Grace or analyze her or medicate her. She was simply sharing her own journey through grief and showing Grace that survival was possible. "Mrs. Patience?" "Yes, child. Do you think my mother's love is still alive too?" "Oh, Grace. Your mother's love is more alive than ever. Every time your father works hard to take care of you, that's your mother's love in action. Every time someone new comes into your life to help you heal, that's your mother's love opening doors. Every time you choose to try again, to hope again, to live again, that's your mother's love giving you strength." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I miss her so much." "I know you do, child. Missing someone is proof of how much they meant to us. But missing someone doesn't have to mean stopping our own lives. Sometimes, the best way to honor someone we've lost is to live fully, to eat with appreciation, to laugh with joy, to love without fear." "Is that why you came here? To help me live fully again?" Patience's breath caught in her throat. The question was deeper than Grace realized, touching on truths that Patience wasn't ready to reveal. "I came here because I believe that every person deserves to be cared for, especially when they're struggling." Samuel watched this exchange with growing amazement. In 2 days, this simple maid had given his daughter more insight and comfort than months of professional therapy. But who was she? How did she understand grief so intimately? How did she know exactly what Grace needed to hear? "Daddy!" Grace suddenly called out, having spotted him in the doorway. "Come try what Mrs. Patience taught me to make." Samuel entered the kitchen, and Grace ran to him with excitement he hadn't seen in years. "Look, Daddy, I made pepper soup." "Well, Mrs. Patience helped me, but I did most of the work." Samuel looked at the simple bowl of soup, then at his daughter's bright, proud face, then at Patience, who was watching the reunion with tears in her eyes. "It smells wonderful, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." As Grace chattered excitedly about everything she had learned about cooking, Samuel caught Patience's eye over his daughter's head. In that moment, he saw something in Patience's expression that made him pause. She was looking at Grace with the deep, protective love of someone who had known her for much longer than 2 days. But before he could analyze the thought further, Grace was pulling him toward the stove, eager to show off her newfound skills and appetite for life. For the first time in 2 years, the Johnson family kitchen was filled with laughter and the aroma of food made with love. Day 3, Dangerous Territory. Grace was in the garden with Patience, learning to identify herbs and vegetables, when she asked the question that would change everything. "Mrs. Patience, you know where everything is in this kitchen better than Mary does, and she's worked here for years." Patience froze, the mint leaves she was picking scattered to the ground. "What do you mean, child?" "I mean, yesterday you opened the spice cabinet without even looking. You knew exactly which pot to use for the soup. You know how Daddy likes his coffee without asking. And you know how to work our fancy stove better than the French chef did." Grace's observation was sharper than Patience had anticipated. The truth was, Patience did know this kitchen. She had worked in this very kitchen 12 years ago, when Grace was just a toddler taking her first steps across these same marble floors. "I learn quickly," Patience said, hoping to deflect the question while her heart hammered against her ribs. But Grace wasn't easily distracted. "And another thing. You know things about me that I never told you. Like how I prefer my plantains soft but not mushy. Like how I don't like too much pepper in my soup. Like how I always eat the meat first and save the vegetables for last." Patience's hands began to shake slightly. Grace was getting too close to the truth, and Patience wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Child, sometimes when you care about someone, you pay attention to the small details." "Mrs. Patience, have you worked for our family before?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Patience slowly set down her basket of herbs and looked into Grace's eyes. Eyes that looked so much like Elizabeth's that it made Patience's heart ache with old grief and new hope. "Grace, there are some things that are better left in the past. But if you worked here before, why didn't Daddy recognize you?" "Because your father sees the help as invisible unless he needs something," Patience thought but didn't say. "Because rich people don't really look at poor people, especially when they're grieving. Because I was just staff to him, even though your mother treated me like family." Instead, she said, "Your father is a busy man, child. He meets many people." Grace studied Patience's face carefully, reading the emotions there like a book. "You knew my mother, didn't you?" Patience's carefully constructed composure finally cracked. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, but Grace had already seen it. "Your mother was. She was a special woman. Tell me about her. Please. Daddy never talks about her anymore, and I'm starting to forget what she was like." This was dangerous territory. Patience knew that sharing memories of Elizabeth would only lead to more questions, more opportunities for the truth to come out. But looking at Grace's hopeful face, hungry for any connection to her mother, Patience couldn't bring herself to lie completely. "Your mother, Elizabeth, was the kindest woman I ever met. She treated everyone in this house like family, not like servants." "Really? What else?" "She loved to cook, even though your father could afford the best chefs in the world. She would come down to this kitchen in the evenings and cook simple meals with her own hands, especially when she was pregnant with you." "She cooked for me even before I was born?" "Oh yes, child. She would rub her belly while she stirred the soup and tell you stories about all the delicious foods she was going to teach you to make when you were older." Grace's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. Tears of connection, of finally understanding something about her mother that she had never known. "Like you're teaching me now?" "Yes, child. Just like that." Grace was quiet for a moment, processing this new information. "Mrs. Patience, is that why you understand me so well? Because you knew my mother." Patience reached across and took Grace's hands in hers. "Child, your mother used to say that love is not just a feeling, it's an action. Every meal she cooked was an action of love. Every bedtime story she told was an action of love. Even when she was sick." "When she was sick, what did she do?" Patience's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "When she was dying, she made me promise something." Grace held her breath. "She made me promise that no matter what happened, I would always look out for you," she said. "Patience, if Grace ever needs help, if she ever feels lost or broken, please be there for her." The garden was completely silent except for the sound of Grace's shallow breathing and the distant hum of traffic beyond the mansion walls. "So when I heard that you were refusing to eat, when I heard that you were struggling," Patience's voice broke. "I knew it was time to keep my promise." Grace stared at Patience with wide eyes, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "You came back for me? I came back for you." And then, for the first time since her mother died, Grace began to cry. Not tears of sadness or frustration, but tears of relief and gratitude. She had spent 2 years feeling abandoned and alone, not understanding why food tasted like ash in her mouth, why nothing brought her comfort anymore, why she felt so disconnected from the world. Now she understood. She hadn't been rejecting food. She had been rejecting the world that had taken her mother away. But Patience's cooking didn't taste like that world. It tasted like her mother's love, translated through hands that had known Elizabeth personally, that had received her final wishes, that had come back against all odds to fulfill a deathbed promise. "Mrs. Patience?" "Yes, child." "Will you teach me to cook like my mother used to? Will you tell me more stories about her?" Patience smiled through her tears. "I would be honored to." But even as she made this promise, Patience knew that she was walking into dangerous territory. The more time she spent with Grace, the more stories she told, the closer they became, the more likely it was that Samuel would eventually remember her. And when that happened, when he realized who she really was and why she had really come back, would he see her as a blessing or as a threat? Would he understand that she had come back out of love, or would he think she was trying to manipulate the family for money? Would he be grateful that she had kept Elizabeth's dying wish, or would he be angry that she had hidden her identity? These questions haunted Patience as she watched Grace run into the house to tell Mary about the herbs they had picked. But for now, she pushed those worries aside. Grace was healing. Grace was eating. Grace was laughing again. Whatever consequences came later, Patience told herself, it would be worth it to see Elizabeth's daughter whole again. Day 5. The investigation. Samuel sat in his study, staring at security footage from the past week, when something caught his attention. In frame after frame, he watched Patience moving through his house with an ease and familiarity that didn't match her story of being a new employee. She knew where things were without being told. She navigated the kitchen like someone who had worked there for years, not days. She seemed to understand the house's rhythms and routines in a way that new staff never did. More troubling still was the way Grace responded to her. Samuel had been watching his daughter carefully, and Grace's comfort level with Patience went beyond the usual bonding between employer and employee. Grace looked at Patience with recognition, with deep trust, with something that looked almost like familiarity. Samuel called his head of security. "Johnson, I need you to run a comprehensive background check on our new employee, Patience Okoye. I want to know everything. Where she's worked, where she's lived, who she's associated with. Everything." "Yes, sir." "Any particular reason for concern?" "Call it intuition. There's something about her that doesn't add up." 2 hours later, Johnson returned with a file that made Samuel's hands shake as he read it. Patience Okoye, formerly Patience Adebayo, had indeed worked for the Johnson family, 12 years ago, during Elizabeth's pregnancy and the first few years of Grace's life. She had been Elizabeth's personal assistant and cook, practically family to them during the happiest period of their lives. The file showed that Patience had been with them when Grace took her first steps, spoke her first words, celebrated her first birthday. She had been the one Elizabeth trusted to care for Grace during her difficult pregnancy, the one who had stayed overnight when baby Grace was sick, the one who had cooked special meals to help Elizabeth through morning sickness and later through the early stages of her cancer treatment. But the file revealed more painful truths. After Elizabeth died, Samuel had been so lost in his grief that he had made drastic changes to the household staff without notice, unable to bear the reminders of his wife. Patience, who had loved Elizabeth like a sister, had been let go along with everyone else. Dismissed with 2 weeks severance pay and no reference, despite years of devoted service. The reports showed that Patience had struggled to find work after that. Her association with the Johnson family should have been a golden reference, but Samuel had been unreachable in his grief, and no one else could vouch for her intimate knowledge of high-end household management. She had been forced to take menial jobs, cleaning offices at night, washing dishes in restaurants, doing laundry for other people's families, barely surviving on wages that were a fraction of what she had earned working for them. And then the file revealed the most devastating part. Patience had a grandchild, David, who was currently in the hospital with a serious illness requiring surgery that cost more than she could earn in years of domestic work. She had been working multiple jobs to pay for his medical bills, but it wasn't enough. According to the medical records, David had less than 2 weeks before his condition would become critical. Samuel closed the file and sat in stunned silence. The woman who had saved his daughter was the same woman he had abandoned in his grief 2 years ago. The woman who had kept her promise to his dying wife had been struggling to survive while he lived in luxury, completely unaware of her sacrifices. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. Patience hadn't come to his house as a stranger looking for work. She had come as someone who had once been family, someone who had loved Elizabeth and Grace deeply, someone who had been cast aside in his moment of deepest selfishness. And now she was here, risking everything to honor a promise she had made to his wife, while her own grandchild lay dying in a hospital bed. Samuel put his head in his hands and wept, for his wife, for his daughter, for the loyal woman he had failed, and for his own blindness to the pain he had caused others in his grief. He found Patience in the kitchen that evening, quietly preparing dinner while Grace did homework at the counter nearby. The scene was so domestic, so peaceful, that it reminded him powerfully of the evenings when Elizabeth was alive and their house felt like a home instead of a mausoleum. "Patience, we need to talk." She turned around, and he could see in her eyes that she knew he had discovered the truth. "Sir." "Grace, sweetheart, why don't you go finish your homework in your room? Patience and I need to discuss some adult matters." Grace looked between them, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay? Mrs. Patience isn't in trouble, is she?" "No, darling. Everything is fine. We just need to talk privately." After Grace reluctantly left, Samuel and Patience stood facing each other across the kitchen island. The same island where Elizabeth used to sit and plan meals, where baby Grace had eaten her first solid foods, where countless family memories had been made. "Why didn't you tell me who you were when you first came here?" Samuel asked, his voice heavy with emotion. Patience wiped her hands on her apron slowly, buying time to choose her words carefully. "Because I didn't come here for myself, sir. I came here for Grace. But all this time, you've been struggling. Your grandchild is in the hospital, and you've been working for almost nothing to help my daughter, while your own family suffers. Sir, when your wife was dying, she didn't ask me to take care of myself. She asked me to take care of Grace. That promise was more important to me than my own comfort." Samuel felt his throat constrict with emotion. "Patience, I owe you an apology that I can never adequately give. When Elizabeth died, I was so lost in my grief that I forgot about everyone else who loved her too. I should have helped you. I should have remembered what you meant to our family. I should have." "Sir, grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. I understood then, and I understand now. But you came back anyway. Even after how I treated you, even after I failed you when you needed help, you came back to save my daughter." Patience looked at him with eyes full of gentle sadness. "Sir, love is not dependent on how we are treated. Your wife loved Grace, and through her, I learned to love Grace too. That love doesn't die just because circumstances change. When I heard that Grace was in trouble, I couldn't ignore Elizabeth's last request, no matter what had happened between us." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, processing the depth of loyalty and forgiveness that stood before him. Finally, he said, "Patience, I want to offer you something. Not just a job, but a place in our family again. Grace needs you, and frankly, so do I. I want you to be Grace's permanent companion and guardian. I want to pay for David's medical treatment immediately and bring him here to live with us when he's recovered. I want to give you the life Elizabeth would have wanted you to have." Patience stared at him in shock, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Say yes, please. Let me start making up for the wrong I did you. Let me honor my wife's memory by taking care of the people she loved." From the doorway, Grace's voice interrupted them. "Mrs. Patience, are you going to stay with us forever?" Both adults turned to see Grace standing there, hope and fear warring in her eyes. She had been listening from the hallway, unable to resist eavesdropping on a conversation that would determine her future. "Grace, how much did you hear?" Samuel asked gently. Enough to know that Mrs. Patience used to work here before, that she knew Mommy, and that she came back because Mommy asked her to take care of me. Grace's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her face. "Is that true, Mrs. Patience? Did my mother really ask you to watch over me?" Patience knelt down to Grace's eye level. "Yes, child. Your mother loved you so much that even when she was dying, she was making sure you would be protected and cared for. And you kept your promise? Even when it was hard? Even when Daddy sent you away?" "I kept my promise because love keeps its promises, no matter what." Grace ran into Patience's arms, and Samuel joined the embrace, all three of them crying tears of joy, relief, and healing. "So you'll stay?" Grace asked, pulling back to look at Patience's face. "You'll really stay this time?" Patience looked between the father and daughter, this family that had been broken by grief but was now healing through love and forgiveness, and she knew there was only one answer she could give. "Yes, child. I'm going to stay. And I'm going to bring David here to live with us, so you can have a little brother to help take care of." Grace's face lit up with pure joy. "A little brother? Really? Really? And I'm going to teach you everything your mother wanted you to know about cooking, about love, about being strong even when life is hard." Samuel watched this exchange with a heart so full he thought it might burst. In the space of 1 week, his broken family had been made whole again. Not just healed, but expanded with love that had been waiting patiently for the chance to flourish. 6 months later, the Johnson mansion was transformed. The cold, echoing halls that had felt like a museum for 2 years were now filled with laughter, conversation, and the constant aroma of home-cooked meals prepared with love. Grace, now healthy and vibrant, was in the kitchen teaching 8-year-old David how to make jollof rice while Patience supervised with a proud smile. David, fully recovered from his surgery and thriving in his new home, had brought an energy and joy to the house that none of them had expected. "David, you have to be patient with the rice," Grace was saying, unconsciously echoing the lessons Patience had taught her. "Good things take time to develop properly." "Just like how it took time for me to get better?" David asked, stirring the rice carefully. "Exactly like that. And just like how it took time for our family to heal after Mommy died." Samuel walked in from work to find his house transformed, not just by the physical changes, but by the warmth and love that now filled every room. The dinner table that had sat empty for 2 years was now the center of family life, where they gathered every evening to share meals and stories and plan for the future. "Daddy!" Grace called out happily. "David and I made dinner for everyone, and we only burned the plantain a little bit." "Only a little bit?" Samuel laughed, hugging both children. "That sounds perfect to me." At the dining table, they all sat together. Samuel, Grace, Patience, and David. It wasn't a traditional family, but it was perfect for them. As they held hands for prayer, Samuel looked around at these people who had come together through tragedy and found healing in each other. "Mrs. Patience," Grace said as they prepared to eat, "thank you for keeping your promise to my mother. Thank you for coming back for me when I needed you most. Thank you, child, for teaching me that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we create from love and forgiveness, not just blood." Samuel looked around the table at his expanded family, his daughter healthy and happy, the loyal woman who had honored his wife's dying wish, and the bright boy who had brought new life to their home. His house was full of laughter again, his daughter was thriving, and he had learned that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as the most ordinary people. As they began to eat the simple, delicious meal prepared with love, Samuel understood what his wife had known all along: that the most important ingredient in any recipe, in any family, in any life, is not found in any cookbook or taught in any school. It's love. Pure, patient, unconditional love that keeps its promises even when the world falls apart. As my people say, Patience said softly, when the heart heals, the whole family heals. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and the aroma of food made with love, the Johnson family was finally, completely whole. This is African Tales by Amani, reminding you that sometimes the most powerful healing comes from the most unexpected places, and that love always keeps its promises, even when we think all hope is lost. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are loved and that their pain has purpose. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes love to heal a broken heart. Drop a comment below telling us how this story made you feel, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest tales of hope and healing. Until next time, and thank you for being part of the African Tales by Amani.